Graham Clark. He explores something that sits underneath many of today's conversations about AI: layoffs, restructuring, the future of work, and the collapse of certainty. Graham reflects on growing up during massive political and economic shifts in Britain and later participating in large scale business transformations that dramatically impacted people's lives. What makes this conversation powerful is that it acknowledges two truths at the same time. Sometimes change is necessary for survival, and sometimes that same change deeply hurts people who built their identities around a system they believed would protect them. We talk about loyalty, disruption, privilege, stability, and the emotional reality of realizing that the world you thought would always exist is changing underneath your feet. And this conversation is the most relevant right now.
I certainly did not think about what I was doing to people when I was in the re-engineering thing. I mean, I had the golden what we're doing is good, and there's a lot of pain being caused, but it's necessary pain. It's like cutting out the cancer. So, I mean, that was really my first largely societal personal awareness thing, because that was when I was moving out of the music industry and Maggie got elected. I mean, she was the first politician I voted for, and my parents hated her. But she had that thing, the country's dead, basically. I mean, we dragged ourselves into the gutter after the Second World War, desperately hoping that the empire would come back, with all the industries nationalized and being run by lords and ladies who could barely change a toilet roll. But they got the job because of who they were. And she came in and fired all those people, is what people forget about Maggie, right? She ended up being elected in a party that despised her so that they would never, ever have to have a female prime minister because she was supposed to lose. And then the first thing she did is she turned around and there's a lot of Donald things in that. She turned around and annihilated her own party and said, "You are the problem. These labor people are supposed to be advocating for the working class and unions and everything else. You're not. You're supposed to be the other people, and you're idiots." So I think, I learned really early on this idea that there was no way to sustain the current state and that the future was going to be bloody. And I got to run around in the streets of London with the miners throwing bottles at police and all the other things you're supposed to do when you're that age, or I think you are. So I think I just got very young. I got that idea that change was positive and messy, but if you don't come from that, if you come from a place where life is pretty damn good as it is, then and you get fairly far on in your life, that can be really hard. And that's what we were doing to people in the re-engineering thing. These people were in their late 50s. They had, quote, devoted their entire life on a promise, right? Were they working as hard as they should have done for what they got? Possibly not, but that wasn't the deal. There was this idea of loyalty to your company and your company would be loyal to you. That's gone. But it was also necessary because whole companies were going to disappear. National institutions, because they were basically heading into bankruptcy. And so how do you do that? And so all of those early stages are all part of this, being in the middle of some kind of change. If I'd been on the outside of it, if I'd grown up in suburban Atlanta and been in a nice middle-class family, enjoying this amazingly fat, luxurious American lifestyle that we live. If you travel to other parts of the world, you start to realize just how fat and luxurious it is, even in its worst moments. I don't think I'd had that perspective in any size, shape, or form. And, and then I've always been an outsider. I've never been there. And my Atlanta definition, Tino Mantella, used to be the president of TAG, and brilliant, brilliant guy. One of many people I've been fortunate enough to work around that's taught me a huge amount. And so he and a couple other people taught me about like the Atlanta onion, which is that Atlanta, even today, Atlanta is still this very specific social structure where, the heart of the onion is the Koch sisters. It's like that institutional. That's true of every country, city in the world, right? It's like the Kennedys or whatever. And then you have people around them, and then you have people in the layer around them, and then people, right? And I was always on the outside. And so if you're on the inside, you were taken care of. It'd be like going to the right Ivy League school, whatever. So, and I lived that in 2011 when, the company I was working for blew up. The guy that I was working for turned out to be a crook, Brit, by the way. And I had a couple of big companies that bellied up at the same time, and the financial crash was kind of just beginning to hit the bottom of the trough and turn, and I stuck up my hand and said help to people I'd made huge amounts of money for in Atlanta in the previous 15 years or everywhere, and the only callbacks came from Bangalore, San Francisco, London, Amsterdam, San Francisco, Toronto, Miami. Not a peep. And we literally packed up and moved to our beach house. I mean, I'm like, fuck this city. I'm like, screw you people. Literally in a really nasty way. And in subsequent years, I talked to people, and the reaction was really funny. So perception, right? Firstly, they came back and said, we didn't think you were serious because you were always taken care of. Right? We just assumed you were joking, right? I was like, oh, thanks. And then the other one was, which more importantly, is they said, well, we helped the people who were directly next to us. So they had to take care of their people on their onion layer before they went to the next layer or the next layer. And so there was always the appetite or the energy to be able to take care of people was always exhausted by the time they did the people around them. And I was like, well, did you think about who actually helped you? Because there were people you took care of who didn't do a damn thing for you when things were going well. Oh, and I was like, and they aren't nasty people, and I'm good friends with them. They're like, you know what, I never even thought about. But that means I'd have to have dumped my friend. I'm like, well, yeah, because what does the word friend mean, right? And a different way. But if they didn't come through that process with any pain, they still don't get it. Because until they've been there, and gone home to their honey and said, we've got choices, mortgage or groceries, you don't, and I get it. It just took me a long time to realize that they don't get it, right? They haven't lived it. And so it's lived experience, being around people with a lived experience and actually talking about it, which guys, of course, have a big problem with. And then, as I say, I think it's that comfort zone. And so I actually believe that this will never happen, but, we should find a way to make that kind of change, survival, part of the education curriculum from middle school to retirement or whatever. I don't know what, middle school to wherever that runs out, because I think people don't have the skills. They don't have the awareness and all the rest of the stuff. But in order to do that, you have to teach people awareness of other people and empathy and all the rest of it. And people don't really like that. In general, some people do, but in general, they don't. People want to hang out with people just like them.
If this conversation resonated with you, I think you'll connect deeply with my book, Learn to Love the Roller Coaster. This is the last segment of my interview series with Graham. Graham is featured in the book along with Kent Jones and Sandy Hoffman, all who have been interviewed and are featured in this podcast. Moving forward, I will be talking to other leaders to talk about how they experience change and what they see is happening around the world. Because one of the hardest parts of transformation is not just adapting to a new system, it's grieving the loss of the old one, especially the systems that have shaped your sense of safety and identity and purpose. And right now, many people are experiencing that feeling, some people for the first time. You can learn more about my book and my work through amplified concepts in the description below. And if you enjoyed this, subscribe, share it with somebody, and I'll see you with the next series.